If you have a Bible, open it up to the book of Luke, chapter 12. If you don't, there's Bibles in the chairs in front of you. We're in an elongated study of the Gospel of Luke, and we will continue in that study this morning. It's a rather long passage. You'll be disappointed to know that I'm only going to cover the first 4 verses. It gets rather abrupt as the verses go on. But if you understand the first kind of parable that Jesus gives, it really lends itself to the rest. We're in this, 4th section of the Gospel of Luke. The first section is the kind of birth and preparation of Jesus. The second section of Luke is his ministry up in the Galilee region, which goes on for some 2+ years. And then we're now in the third section, which is the big bulk of the book of Luke, which really starts towards the latter part of chapter 9, goes all the way to the end of chapter 19. It's often called the travel narrative or the Jerusalem document because Jesus starts on the northernmost tip of Israel, probably on Mount Hermon, and it says he sets his face to Jerusalem. So literally for 9 months, Jesus has his face set towards his death in Jerusalem. It doesn't mean he's traveling straight there. That would be nonsense. But it means it's always on his mind. And so you can feel with every step he takes, the weight on his shoulders growing. You can feel the weight of his speaking getting heavier with passages like this morning. And that's why in chapter 9 through 19 we find the bulk of Jesus' parables. We'll probably do 20 sermons between June and December, 20 parables alone from Jesus' teaching. In this particular little section within this big travel narrative or Jerusalem document in chapter 12, Jesus has made clear to us what the setting is. The setting is there's a large crowd, much larger than this. Probably was in August. And people were on vacation. And so they had this large crowd. In fact, chapter 12, verse 1 says, there were so many people, they were stepping on each other. So there's a ton of people. It's kind of like, for those of you old-timers, Dan the Green in Oakland, and, I don't know, maybe Van Halen's playing. And so you have this large crowd, and they're kind of in the background. And within that large crowd, Jesus looks at just those people that really are committed to following him. And so you've got Jesus focused on a very small group of people. It doesn't mean the crowd is not listening. It means they're not the reason he's speaking primarily. And then this will shift actually next week in verse 54, where he'll stop talking to the select group and the crowd becomes, in essence, the target, if you will, of this discussion. And so really what you have is 3 groups. You've got the main group that Jesus is talking to. Men and women, his followers, his disciples, the people that want to walk with him. Then you have this large crowd, mostly made up of what I would call fans. They're people that find Jesus fascinating. They're people that find Jesus interesting. They're people that are amazed by Jesus. They're like, in the beginning of the Gospels, Nicodemus, who came to Jesus at night. They're not Nicodemus at the end of his life, who gave every single thing he had, career-wise, to put his life on the line to redeem the body of Jesus when he died. They're fans, they're not followers. And within that large context of fans, you have really a third group. And it's an extremely hostile group. They're the scribes and the Pharisees, the legal experts, often called the lawyers. They're Torah specialists. And so you have this really diverse group of followers, very small, fans, very interested. And then you have a very hostile group in the Pharisees. It's very important to remember that. So if you read the rest of our passage this morning, when you go home this week and you see the harshness with which Jesus speaks, he is not speaking that way to his own disciples. He has hostile people who are defining their life with God in a very moralistic way, which is not the way Jesus would define the relationship with God. And so, 2 weeks ago, David Ekman covered the first of these teachings when he talked about his disciples, this select group that is following him, that they need to be vigilant in the face of opposition. When opposition comes your way, be vigilant to follow God. Last week we looked at a second passage that he spoke to the disciples of being very vigilant in not looking for life outside of God. You remember the whole passage where the young guy comes to Jesus and says, "Tell my brother to split the inheritance with me." He's a clutcher. He's a demander. That if I get what my brother holds, doesn't matter money, doesn't matter what it is, if I just get what he holds, I will find life. And Jesus tells this parable, and in the end, tells him he's stupid. Your algorithm for life is just sheer stupidity. If you think there is life outside of a relationship with me, you're an idiot. It's literally the vernacular in the Greek. How's that for blunt? We're now in the third section this morning where Jesus will speak about having this kind of vigilance. But he's talking about having this kind of vigilance within the house of God, specifically how his disciples think and feel. And we'll look at that shortly. Our passage this morning is really made up of 3 stanzas. If you remember, I said this Jerusalem document from 9 to 19 is literally a giant poem. Luke is an absolute literary master. It's a giant inverted poem where it goes like A, B, C, D, E, F, and then all the way back. I don't think they did the alphabet backwards. And literally each parallel, that the one above and the one below, the 2 A's match, the 2 B's match, the 2 C's match, the 2 D's match. It's brilliant. And then within that giant poem in Luke, there are poems inside of the poems. This morning's passage is literally another 3-stanza poem. It starts with a pair of metaphorical pictures, a belt and a lamp. And then in stanza 2, Jesus gives this parable explanation, which is really can be inserted between the 2 metaphorical pictures. And then in the 3rd stanza, he does it again by further giving an explanation, and he throws a weird, amazing kind of life-giving twist. It's a little bit like watching somebody make a sandwich, where they start with 2 pieces of bread, and they say, that ain't going to cut it. So they throw in some tomatoes and some lettuce and maybe an onion. They go, God, I'm missing something still. So then here comes the meat, the cheese, and the spreads, and then you go, oh my gosh, now that's a sandwich. That's exactly what Jesus does in this parable, and Luke in partnering with him. There's nothing quite like it in the entire sacred text. And it climaxes in this 3rd stanza, like most poems do, in the center of the 3rd stanza, where the master becomes the servant. It's the master showing what a model of discipleship really looks like. There's this amazing prayer for a person from England, my hair, in the Church of England. It says this: to serve you is perfect freedom. To serve you is perfect freedom. Now, this doesn't resonate with me. When I hear the word serve, it feels a little indentured. It feels a little weighty. It feels pressured. So when I read this, my insides, if you've been in church too long, like I have in one sense, you'll react the same way. To serve you is perfect freedom. So how is it that that is true? Where does that kind of freedom and feeling come in serving God? Let's take a look at each stanza one at a time, and we'll see if we can get an idea. Look with me in the first stanza, chapter 12, verse 35. It says this: be dressed in readiness and keep your lamps lit. So he gives these 2 word pictures. The first one is to belt your robes, is the literal translation. In the Middle East, it's hot. And they typically wear long robes that go down to the ground, almost resting on the dirt, and they're very loose-fitting. This is the only time men wish they were women on earth, is when on a hot day and they can be in a dress. Now, please don't repeat that outside this book. Every man has had this thought, wow, if I just had a dress on. I'm kidding. Well, I've never tried it on at home, but I was a little bit worried when I kept dressing up as a cheerleader over and over on Halloween. About the 6th year, my mom said, something's going on here. You better take the cheerleading outfit away from me. They wore loose-fitting robes. But when a Middle Eastern person has to do something strenuous, then you would immediately put a belt around your robe or put a rope around your robe to tie it up. Because you were going to do something active. You can't have loose-fitting clothes when you're doing stressful work. We see this, for example, in Exodus 12. When the Israelites are going to leave Egypt, they are told to belt up their robes, be ready to go. The great prophet Elijah, after that amazing scene on Mount Carmel where he battles with these pagan priests, King Ahab takes off in his chariot. Elijah belts his robe and takes off like Usain Bolt running after the chariot and even passes it up, and a scene only Forrest Gump has been able to replicate. And another amazing prophet, Jeremiah, before he goes before the nations of the world, he is told to belt up his robe. For the follower of Jesus, the analogy should be ridiculously obvious. The follower of Jesus should be prepared to serve God and carry out anything He requests at any time of day or night. It's very obvious. The second metaphor he gives is keep their lamps burning. They're supposed to gird their robes, be ready for the Master when He returns, but also light your lamp. And anybody knows that if you've come into a house or been in a house where the lights went on at night, it's not a great feeling. You're unprepared. So the analogies are very clear. So the question then is, why do the servants in this statement of Jesus need to be so prepared? Or rather, maybe the question is, why are they so prepared? Into this, Jesus speaks a parable. Stanza 2. Look at verse 36. Be like men who are waiting for their master when he returns from the wedding feast, so that they may immediately open the door to him when he comes and knocks. There's two key words in this statement of Jesus at the beginning of this parable. The first one is, be like men who are waiting. In the Syrian or the Arabic translations, I think they do a much better job. They actually translate this as expecting. The word, and Jeremy's been hitting this the last several weeks upstairs when he's been teaching on Luke 15 in the journey class at 9:15. The Greek word is prosdekomai. And it's an amazing word. The word pros, in the beginning of it, means to face towards. Put your face towards the person. The word dekomai, the second half of the word, means to expectantly receive. See, the idea in this word waiting, the word waiting is really a bad translation. When I hear the word waiting in English, it says to me being passive. You're just passively waiting. That is not prosdekomai. This is a person where you look at them and you can say, I literally can see it in their face. They have set their face for the one that they are anticipating coming, and they're expecting him to come. They're excited about him to come back. There's an anticipation, and the anticipation and the passion is so strong, you can read it all over their face. The second word that Jesus hits that I think is really key in this, he says, be like men who are anticipating with excitement for their master when he returns. Any of your Bibles have a different word than returns?
Knocks.
Say it. Okay, you jumped ahead, but yes, we'll get to the word knock in a second. No other translations for that word? The word is better translated when he withdraws. So the setting again is, it's a wedding. It's an evening wedding. There's a master of a large estate. The master of the large estate is throwing an evening party, this wedding celebration. And the idea here is, he is in the main room, and there's the party going on, and the idea in this passage is the master withdraws from the main room. He actually steps out of the main room into a side room, if you will. And in large estates like this, they usually had a large public room. So he's almost, in a sense, retiring, if you will, to his private suite for a little bit. And we learned, as you said there just a second ago, he knocks. We learned several weeks ago in the parable, do you remember this, the friend at midnight, that it would be a really weird thing to knock. Do you remember that the guy has a visitor come to him at midnight? He doesn't have, he has food, but he doesn't have the kind of food to present this late night visitor that would really make the community look good. So he goes next door, but he doesn't knock because he doesn't want to scare the guy half out of his wits. Right? He's his friend. In the Middle East, you have open windows. So if you knocked at midnight, you would scare people. And they're friends. So he just speaks through the window in a nice, calm way. And yet, in this passage, the master knocks. It's kind of a weird thing. It's just the opposite of that passage. So the question is, why is he knocking on the door? And why is he not simply calling like the friend at midnight? Again, you have a large public room with a wedding festival going on. He is withdrawn into another room. He is not outside the house. Do you get that? So the servants are in the public room. They are waiting for him to return. He has left. He has withdrawn. They're waiting for him to come back. They're not scared by the knock because he's not knocking from the outside of the house. They're not in any danger whatsoever. He knocks from within the house, from a room just adjacent to the room they're in. The wedding party is just going in full swing. Everything is moving, and yet the master knocks because he's sure, listen to this, that the servants are expecting his return, but they're not only expecting his return, they're anticipating with excitement when the master will re-enter the room of this huge party. He expects they will open the door when they knock because he expects them to be excited about him knocking and coming back. They excitedly wait with anticipation. The servants know, again, they're secure in the house. They're in no danger from someone on the outside. This is a room inside. But still, why did he leave the party at all when there's a wedding party going on? The final scene helps us understand why. In stanza 3. Look at in this case, in the slide we have. Blessed are those slaves whom the master will find on the alert when he comes. Truly I say to you that he will gird himself to serve and have them recline at the table and will come up and wait on them, whether he comes in the second watch or even the third, and finds them so. Blessed are those slaves. Some observations about this. First of all, let's look at them at lines at a time. I didn't show this well. For some reason it didn't translate in the PowerPoint. But really it's an inverted scene. So it's really, you have line 7. Line 8 is indented from that. Line 9 would be indented farther. Line 10 would be the center. And then you'd start backing down with a line 11 and 12 and 13. 7 and 13 match. 8 and 12 actually match. And 19 and 11 are the heart of this amazing poem by Luke. So let's look first at lines 7 and 13. And this is why I made the comment about that England liturgy statement. To serve you is perfect freedom. This is why it can ring so south for us. He uses the word slave. Blessed are those slaves. This never sits well with me when I read the Bible. Paul refers to himself as a slave of Christ. Every time I hear that, it just kind of makes me just bend over and just kind of wince a little bit. It's not a good word in America. Is that correct? We don't hear this in a good way. It's interesting. Residents of a wealthy estate, there was a clear pecking order. You had the master, who's the estate owner. You had his mistress and the children. You had the manager of his estate. You had foremen underneath him. You had permanent hired staff. You had day laborers. And at the bottom of that list, you had the slaves. The master in this parable is seen dealing with the lowest of all. The master in this parable is seen dealing with the one that people reject. That is ostracized. That is not included. That is not the elite of the elite. That's who the master is included. The goal of this usage of slave is not to degrade the one listening to it. The goal is to heighten your sense of how amazing the master is in this passage. Does that make sense? The usage of slave is not so that all of us listen to this and go, wow, what a loser I am. What we're supposed to do is go, wow, that the master would pay attention to a slave is really incredible. And the scene opens and closes with this unique phrase, blessed are those slaves. The word blessed in Greek is makarios. And if you hear nothing else this morning, please hear this comment. Makarios, this word blessed, is not something bestowed in the future. It's a condition that already exists. This is the key to the entire passage. The message isn't to the servants, if you're awake, and if you're doing the right thing, if you've tied your robe, if you have the lamps lit, and you're waiting expectantly, then you're blessed. That is not how this reads in the Greek. The message is, because you know you're blessed, because you have such a deep sense of how much this master likes you, because you have such a soulful experience of how much the master is excited and his favor rests on you, as a result, you put your robe on and tie it around. As a result, you light your lamp. And as a result, you sit and watch the door and wait. No matter how much the rest of the party is going on, that, by the way, is not for you. You cannot get your eyes off the door. You are so enveloped in the assurance of how your master feels about you, the servant is, that in anticipation she stands staring at the door. When will he come back? It's a really different twist. We don't think this way, unfortunately, in church. We read a passage like this and immediately think, wow, I better make sure I'm ready. Wow, I better get my robe tied. Wow, I better be awake. And it's not the message in this passage. We are ingrained internally to perform for God, and it happens all the time, and we don't even know we're doing it. My daughter came home this summer and asked me, would you lead a college study with a bunch of students? And it's kind of funny. I must be the key to sending the crowd. We started with 10. Week 2 we had 6. Last week we had 4. Pretty soon it'll be me and my dog Petey. Just kind of going through the scriptures together. We sat for 3 hours last week. Myself, my daughter, and 3 girls. And we were literally trying to process this idea. And all of these girls were saying the same thing to me. This is not my understanding of Christianity. This is not how I see it working. I tell you, that is not Christianity. Christianity is not you're a tomato canner, and when we see how many cans of tomatoes you do today, by the end of the day, we'll see if the master's happy with you. That's not how it works. The servants have such a deep sense of the favor that rests on them, and how much this master really digs them, that they can't take their eyes off the door. It's really amazing. And as a result, they anticipate his coming back with huge excitement. They're not afraid to see him in any stretch of the imagination. In fact, they can't wait to see him, because they know already his favor rests on them. Let's look at lines 8 and 12. These two match perfectly, where the master comes and finds them in both, but there's this weird twist in the second line. If in the second or third watch he comes and finds us. It may be in the second watch Jesus is trying to say, when I come back, as this master did, between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. It may be the third watch, 2 a.m. to sunrise. But don't think for a second I'm not coming back. Don't be lulled asleep asleep that the party is going on, and it's not for you, by the way, and you're not having a party because you're in anticipation, waiting for the master to come back, don't think for a moment, I'm not coming back. Don't be lulled asleep by the party going on in the big room. Does that make sense? He's looking and he's saying like to you, don't be lulled asleep. I'm coming back. Don't think for a moment that your pain is going to last. Don't think for a second that the party is going to go on forever. It won't. I'm coming back. And if you know with great anticipation and with great conviction how much my favor rests on you, you'll be excited as you watch the door. You won't be weighted down with, oh my gosh, I better do all the right things. Doing all the right things breeds contempt. It breeds anxiety, it breeds pressure, and it breeds failure. Lines 9 through 11, the pinnacle of this passage. This is where the real surprise comes in. Amen, I say to you, and that's how you know something amazing is coming on when he says, wow, listen up. He will gird himself. So the master is returning now, having withdrawn for but a moment, and cause them to recline and eat, and come to them and serve them. The servants have been waiting expectantly for his return. They have put their belt on their robe. They have lit the lamps because they know already they're blessed by this master. They know his favor rests on them. The party rolls on without them, but they're listening for the knock at the door, for their master's inevitable return. And they're listening for no matter how long it takes. But when he arrives in his wedding garb, he binds his belt around his waist. What's he doing? He is going to serve them when he returns. Anybody in the Middle East listening to this would be absolutely cringing. There's no way the master will serve the slaves. This is Peter. When Jesus gets on his knees to wash his feet, Peter goes, you will never wash my feet. See, Peter knows who it is he's talking to at that point. This is the reaction that you would think you would have. If the servants recline at this U-shaped triclinium table, they are reclining for one reason. They're going to have a meal. But in their mind, they're thinking, what food are we going to eat? We were the ones preparing all the food for the wedding party. And yet the sense in this parable is, he sits them down, he girds his belt, and immediately they're served. So there's food already prepared for them. But they prepared none of it. The master has already prepared the banquet for the people who have given their life to following him. The master has already slipped out of the room, in the house by the way, and prepared a feast for those. And oh, by the way, it says he serves them. He doesn't have servants serve them. That would be beneath his slaves to him. His slaves are more important to him than that. He must, in his mind, serve them himself, because it wouldn't be good enough to do anything else. This passage is Philippians 2 all over again. Who, although Jesus existed in the form of God, he did not regard equality with God as a thing to be grasped, but he emptied himself, taking the form of a bondservant, and being made in the likeness of men, being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. This is the mystery of Christianity. And this is going to rankle some of you, and I'll enjoy it. God doesn't just count you important. He actually considers your life, and he considered your life in his Son Jesus as more important than his own. Jesus looked at his life, he looked at your lives, and said, your life is more important than my life. Now, by the way, in the Scriptures, Jesus is the creator of the universe, not the Father. Jesus is the one that speaks creation into being. And he looks at you and I and says, and by the way, your life is more important than mine. The Father feels the same way, by the way, who would send His Son to die for you and I so that we never wondered our value. We never had to walk around impressing everybody. We never had to perform all day long to see if we can be liked more by God, because it was accomplished in His Son. Because the Father looks at us and says, I count your life even more important than my Son's, so I'll let Him die. This is what breeds the feeling of ultimate freedom. This is what is in the liturgy in the church family. To serve you, God, is perfect freedom. Not because I'm doing it to impress you, but because you're impressed already. The servant chooses to serve not to impress God, but because he knows the Father's favor rests on him already, or her already. There isn't a hint, by the way, of being degraded in this. This is why Paul very, very happily said, oh man, I'm a slave of Jesus. And there's no sense in Paul that he's being degraded in that. Because he knows that Jesus' rest, that his favor rests on him. Only gratitude to the one who gave his life for us, will breed a life of this kind of freedom. If you have another brand of Christianity, it's not Christianity. You hear me when I say that? If you wake up every day and you say to yourself, I must do more, I must serve more, and God will be thrilled with it, you, quite frankly, are bastardizing the cross. And I do not use that word lightly. The image is Jesus is hanging on the cross, and you see him dying, and you look at it and you say, yes, but gosh, here's my daily Bible reading. Blech! Oh, thank you, Jesus, for the cross, but you also realize I served 7 people today. And the earth shakes. The Father is thrilled with the work of His Son. All He asks is that we look at it for a split second and say, I respect what He did. And the Father never gets over it. We, if we are followers of Jesus, if we have respected His Son for a moment, have as much favor from God as you will ever get. Nothing will change your behavior like believing your blessing from the Father. Nothing will correct morality other than sensing deeply, as a servant of God, the favor that rests on you. Any other equation is religion, and it is not Christianity. I love what this Arabic theologian said, and we'll close with this. The one who stays awake refers to the person who enters into the realm of spiritual consciousness, where a meeting with the Master is realized. This is where the slave ceases to be a slave and becomes a partner in love and a partner in glory. This is where those who are loved sit at the table of the one who loves. This is where one who loves is girded with glory, and he sits and feeds them from his body and gives them to drink from his cup. This is the fulfillment of a true promise given by the Savior as a covenant which he resolutely took upon himself when he said, I will not eat of this Passover meal except in the kingdom. This is where he shares with us his joy and his glory. The Messiah fulfills this when he wills and chooses. And it is his pleasure to complete this for those whom the world has rejected and repudiated. He comes to them and wipes away the tears from their eyes and lets them taste his love in order that they might forget their suffering. Let's pray. Father, I'm so deeply bothered that for so long we have moralized this walk with you. Father, we're ill-read, we're ill-taught. We lean on the flesh when we think that in morality we do these things and you'll somehow be more pleased with us. And we confess and say we're sorry. May we not add to the work of the cross. Father, this morning, in some way, would you cause us to literally feel your favor resting upon us and not settle with anything less than a deep sense of that truth.